The information contained in this episode is for informational purposes only. No material is intended to be a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment.
We need a revolution. There's only one solution. I need somebody to show me love. We need a revolution.
Hello, welcome to Inform Life Radio. I'm Bob Runnels, your host this week, again filling in for Bernadette, who's on a special assignment. She's been doing some amazing work on the East Coast, and we're just holding down the fort here as we can with Informed Choice Washington being your sponsors for this show. We broadcast across the Puget Sound area, and we're happy to have you on Drive Time Friday. So today we have an amazing guest. We're going to be talking about cancer treatments that we may or may not have heard about, but a lot of different alternatives are coming out there now, and we'll be excited to talk with Bill Supple in just a moment. I'll remind you that our members do sponsor our radio show here on KKNW, and it does cost a bit. We do have some other advocacy work that takes a bit of money, and we'd love it if you guys can remember to donate a little bit to our nonprofit at informedchoicewa.org when you get the chance. You can just go to the website, and there's a donate button. You'll find everything you need to know and all of our great information that we'll have there. We'll have a recording also of the show today. We'll have, in fact, the book author's book here. I'd like to bring on my co-host, Lisa. Thank you.
Hi there.
Lisa, how you doing?
Happy Friday. Good. How are you, Bob?
Friday. Yeah, I'm good. We're covering all the bases here. Legislative session is over, so we don't have too much other Washington news to go over. We didn't have many favorable things to talk about anyway. I'd rather talk about a revolution in healthcare as our lead song goes. If we can keep that revolution in healthcare going, we are going to bring on Bill Supple as our guest. Author Bill Supple, welcome.
Hi, Bob. Hi, Lisa. How are you?
Hello. Welcome.
Good.
Yeah, we're doing really good. Yeah.
Thanks for having me. I'm here with good news. There actually is a cure for cancer, some cancers, and it's in the form of an animal anti-parasitic known as fenbendazole. And the reason I can be relatively confident as to that being a fact is I saw it work on my mother-in-law. So in 2021, she was 83 years old. She went in for a bowel obstruction. In the process of doing that, they found that she had metastatic breast cancer everywhere: her lungs, liver, bones, kidneys. She felt that she had lived a full life, did not want to be subjected to the horrors of chemotherapy and radiation at her age. And she opted to just go home to hospice. And she was in such dire straits that they administered last rites to her because they weren't sure she would make it home with the 2-mile drive. So that's how bad she was. So she went home, and in the meantime, more or less the same day, I had read about something called fenbendazole, and it was as strange as it sounds to most of the listeners. It sounds like a toxic chemical. It sounds, very medicinal, very pharmaceutical. But I looked into it, and someone had said and posted a comment on an article that said, try fenbendazole. It cured my prostate cancer. And really, that's all it took. Once I saw the word, I could look it up, and I looked into a lot of the preclinical science behind the anti-cancer actions of fenbendazole, and they were pretty impressive. Something that really hadn't reached the mainstream at this point.
Yeah, so, it sounds like the timing for this, just coming across this information at this stage in your lives, that's amazing.
Right. So it was kind of, the timing is everything, right? So anyway, what we did was it's available over the counter. It's extremely inexpensive.
Oh.
So I went down to the local Tractor Supply feed store and got some. And I took it for 3 days, figuring, if it makes me sick, we don't want to make a sick woman sicker. And then I sent down some packets to my wife, who was with her mother in Florida. And she took it. We figured a 50% genetic match. If it doesn't make her sick, maybe it's okay to try it. So my mother-in-law said she had nothing to lose. She was not going to do any traditional treatment. So her husband mixed it into her yogurt every morning, the small 222 milligram dose.
Is it a
And
paste?
it's a powder. It comes in a
Okay.
paste, but it's a white powder that has the consistency of confectioner's sugar.
Okay,
And
sugar is fine.
so we bought a bunch of it online. It comes in a I can reach it here. This happened to be the brand that we used, but there's a bunch of them on Amazon from Fenben Labs. But it comes in a 100-gram bottle, so that gives you 400 doses for about $98. So it's going to last you the better part of a year.
No, that's
So anyway, her husband mixed it up in her yogurt every day, and she wasn't really paying attention. She just ate her yogurt. And then after about 2 weeks, we noticed that her activity level, appetite, attitude, and appearance had all improved to where she felt like she was doing much, much better and well enough to fire hospice. So she was doing her own, taking care of herself. So that was about 2 weeks. And then about 6 weeks in, she was well enough to go back to her oncologist. So when she left the hospital, her blood tumor marker, which is a measure of the degree of breast cancer, was about 316. 6 weeks later, it was more or less in half. So we knew that the fenbendazole, which was really the only thing she was taking that would have that sort of an effect, was having an effect. So much so that, the cancer was on the run. Now with the oncologist, she did have some spot radiation in her back because she was having some pain, but that was really the only traditional treatment she had. It wouldn't account for the metastases disappearing all over her body. So we continued every day with the Fenben, and by about 3 to 4 months, her blood tumor markers were normal, and she was fine. And she's been that way ever since. So she's getting ready to turn 88, and she's, doing great.
That's an amazing case study there, Bill. And thank you.
Right.
I want to get something. I did forget some housekeeping.
So-
Got to get this out of the way. That this show, we don't actually. What's the wording, Lisa?
You're not telling people to go do this. You're just
Correct.
This is just information.
We
Yeah,
are
and
not providing any legal or medical advice or prescription activity here. We are simply providing a great, great story and a set of other solutions that may work if people want to research it more.
Right. So this is all about self-treatment. And so what my mother-in-law did was she was self-treated when she didn't want traditional treatment, and it worked. So anyway, if I had not seen that myself, I obviously would be skeptical that fenbendazole could cure cancer. So once that happened, good news travels fast. And I was getting, so how did she do it? How did Roberta do this? So first it was family, then it was friends, then it was friends of friends. So it was kind of getting out of control, explaining how she did it, which really was exactly what I just said. She just took it in the morning, and the cancer was eradicated. And the mechanisms
And
for
how
that
long
happening.
ago was this, Bill?
This was in 2021 and
How long ago?
2022. 2021 and 2022. Okay. So, and like I said, it's been going on 5 years, 5 years now that she's been thriving. So one thing led to another, and my wife and I felt that, we need to have a way to standardize the way of telling her story so that we tell it the same way every time. So I started the fenbendazole.substack.com. So the first post was her case story in a lot more detail than what I went into. But then what started to happen was other people who either learned from her experience or who were already self-treating their various cancers with fenbendazole started to say, hey, it worked for me too. So now I was getting these submitted case reports that I was now publishing alongside hers on Substack. So now it really had momentum. So, there were a lot of the testimonials come in as, hey, it worked for me. And that's really all people want to, that's as detailed as they want to get into it. But some people will get into, I'll say, are you interested in answering a couple questions? And, they will tell me as much as they can based on their memory and their experiences. So the case reports that I have there are relatively complete as far as, a layman's sort of thing. What was interesting, though, was last year in 2025, 3 of those case reports were published in a peer-reviewed cancer journal called Case Reports in Oncology by Dr. Makis and Perek Martinez. So those are the most significant case reports out there with fenbendazole. But interestingly, in just a couple months ago, those were retracted, not because of the scientific, that paper was retracted, not because of the scientific merits, but because the main author, Dr. Makis, apparently didn't disclose a financial interest because he treats people with fenbendazole, a cheap off-patent drug that really has no commercial value at all. So it's kind of ironic. I just released a Substack today about that, how ironic it is that, if that's the standard, there would be no publications in oncology that examine new drugs because everyone has a financial interest.
Right, but he's not getting royalties from its
Right.
use. He has, maybe a patient pays him for a visit, but it's not like you have royalties coming in like is our complaint with the NIH scientists.
Right. So, that at some level, the empire is striking back against fenbendazole. But I kind of think that the cat's out of the bag at this point. What was interesting with my mother-in-law and with all of the case reports is there are no side effects. So that is really that people are obviously it's a new drug. There must be side effects if it kills cancer. No, the side effect is it kills cancer. It's an anti-parasitic that targets parasites, but fortunately, human cancer cells have the same structural vulnerability that the parasites do in terms of microtubule vulnerability. So the animal anti-parasitic kills not only parasites but also cancer cells. So it basically it's a targeted approach. It only kills the cancer cells. So the human healthy cells have 100 times less affinity for fenbendazole than do cancer cells. So that's why there's no side effects. It only kills the cancer cells. So it's kind of the holy grail of what you would want as a cancer treatment. It's lethal, it's specific, and because of its specificity, there are no side effects. Side effects in terms of adverse side effects. There may be untold, unrecognized side effects down the road, but so far there's nothing that people's hair don't fall out or they don't get anemia or anything like that. So it's a relatively clean cure. So it's quite amazing. And if you go through the Substack, you'll see that it cures all kinds of solid tumor cancers, breast cancer, prostate cancer, various forms of lung cancer, colon cancer, pancreatic cancer, which is very difficult to cure anyway. Rectal cancer, melanoma, a number of melanomas on there.
But as far as you're saying there's a finite set of the cancers, or you said solid growth tumors.
Solid growth tumors. There's some preclinical research to suggest that it would work on blood cancers, but I haven't seen any case reports come in. People have said, yeah, I had this type of leukemia or, non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, and it worked, but that was basically all I heard about that. So it's not like I have any detailed information other than them saying it worked for me. So
Okay. Yeah. Are you requesting case studies with, being able to fill out some kind of set of information, a format that you're requesting?
yeah,
People use?
yeah. Since I started writing the book, I kind of took a break from the case studies, so I will publish some that are new and different. But for the most part, you can only have how many triple negative breast cancer success stories do you need?
Mm-hmm.
So it kind of becomes repetitive after a while.
Okay.
So kind of demonstrating the point has been made. So now what I'm doing is I'm looking at extending those observations. I call them community trials because they're people self-treating themselves in a very haphazard way. When you go through all the case reports, the only thing that's constant is the presence or absence of fenbendazole. And you have a very low number of subjects that are all doing something different. The dosage is all over the place. They're all taking, their own pet supplements, vitamin D, vitamin E, turkey tail mushrooms, whatever they think is going to work, as long as it doesn't interfere with fenbendazole, which really nothing appears to. It's fine for people to take that. So, and what I find a lot of people are concerned about is, gee, it's a binary choice. I've just gotten diagnosed with non-small cell lung cancer, and should I do fenben or should I do traditional? Well, that's really not the question. It's what are the costs and benefits of doing traditional, and what are the costs and benefits of doing fenbendazole? And depending on whether you want to go traditional or not, there is absolutely no reason not to add fenbendazole to whatever traditional treatment you're doing, because there, no side effects, the cost is minimal, and it might just make the difference. So in many instances, a lot of the preclinical work shows that fenbendazole will potentiate the effect of traditional treatments, whether it be radiation or various forms of chemotherapy, vincristine, cisplatin, all the scary sounding names. So that phenomenon is relatively well established. If you add fenbendazole, it's only going to help.
And how far back do studies on fenben go? And you mentioned at the beginning that you went and got it at the farm store. And sorry, I didn't hear you cover this already, but what was it used for? What is it used for in veterinary medicine?
It's a dog dewormer. So you know how if you have a pet, you take them to the vet every 3 or 6 months to be dewormed. And fenbendazole is a doggy dewormer. So it's an anti-parasitic. So that's its primary use. There is a human version called mebendazole, which is basically the same, but that costs a lot more, obviously, but it's the same drug. So people who self-treat ironically use the animal version because, one, it's available, it's cheap, and it's over the counter. So all the case studies are used that I've been involved with are using fenbendazole. And actually, and if you look at the science, fenbendazole is actually the better product compared to mebendazole. So it crosses the blood-brain barrier better, and it's a more, how do I want to say it? Mebendazole is designed to stay in the gut, by definition, to clear out intestinal parasites. Fenbendazole is more of a systemic anti-parasitic. That's how it's designed as the pharmacokinetics of it. But you asked me, how far back does this go? And that's a very interesting question. So when I started the book, I thought I had known more or less everything about fenbendazole. It's a relatively fringe product. There's not really any clinical trials on it. There's not much human data. I mean, the book has the most human data that I've seen, because I've solicited it, I've collected it. But if you go back and look at, as a result of doing the research, I came across a paper from 1975, and in it, these were Belgian scientists, and they had a very obscure paper. They had found that a drug similar to fenbendazole, very similar, killed cancer in a petri dish and in rat brains. And they were bold enough to name it oncodazole, Oncodazole. It kind of tells you, that name kind of tells you what it does, right? Because onco is the root word for tumor. It's the Greek derivation of tumor. So, and you go to an oncologist when you have cancer. So when you have cancer, you would take oncodazole to cure it. So that was back in 1976. That paper was summarily suppressed. I proved this in the book using the published scientific record. I won't bore people about it, but it's hard to prove suppression unless you're using the published scientific record, because the way papers are submitted and reviewed, you have to cite all the relevant references. And in 2002, there was a paper on mebendazole that claimed it was the first to discover that this particular type of drug was an anti-tumor drug, when clearly that was not the case, because it was discovered in 1976 with the oncodazole paper. I don't know if you saw last week, the news that was circulating was that the CIA in 1951 had a memo that was recently uncovered claiming that in the 1930s, Soviet scientists had discovered that anti-parasitics cured cancer as well. So I'm going to give the CIA a pass on this one, because I think what they did is an analyst got the information, they wrote it up, they didn't know what to do with it, so they filed it. And it didn't have meaning until my book came out, where someone said, oh, it was anti-parasitics were covered up in 1975, and it rang a bell in someone's head that, hey, I had seen that document in the 2016 CIA declassified document dump. So it gave it meaning, but I don't think the CIA purposely covered up a cure for cancer. I think they probably didn't know what to make of it. They probably didn't believe it. But anti-parasitics curing cancer has been discovered, suppressed, discovered, suppressed, discovered, suppressed. So the cycle of discovery and repression hopefully is stopping with the current administration, where there is a real appetite and courage to get off this perpetual ineffective treatment model with cancer and actually start to do something that works. The treatments that we have now are garbage. They're just repackaged nonsense that just become more expensive, more side effect ridden, and not effective. So people more people are dying from cancer than ever. We've got better detection capability, but in terms of curing cancer, we are no further with traditional medicine than we were 100 years ago. And whether that's by design, I can't believe that we're that dumb as scientists that we can't figure this out. So I think, things like fenbendazole, which are cheap off-patent solutions, have been repeatedly suppressed. And the whole idea that in my book, the name of the book is called Cancer as a Parasite for a reason, because what I realized as I was reading all these different papers on parasites and cancer, I would get way into the paper and I would have to go back to the cover page because I wasn't sure if I was reading about the characteristics of cancer cells or parasites. So after I did that about 50 times, the light bulb went off that, wait a minute, these are one and the same. So I started to test the hypothesis, is cancer some form of a parasite? Certainly, they're both susceptible to anti-parasitic drugs. Fenbendazole is one, mebendazole, albendazole. Ivermectin is a different class of anti-parasitic. And the more I looked at it, I'm neither an oncologist nor a parasitologist. I could not reject the idea that it's not a parasite because it behaves like one. And the deeper I got into it, the more convinced I was that cancer is definitely some form of a parasite that is a very complex being. But I'll just leave it at that. We're kind of getting in the weeds. But in terms of what I discovered doing researching the book was the number one question that I get with the Substack is, does fenbendazole prevent cancer? And the whole notion of prevention is a logical problem because you can never prove a negative. So if you take jelly beans and you don't get cancer, you can't say that jelly beans prevent cancer because you may never have gotten cancer. Likewise, if you take a drug like fenbendazole, if you never get cancer, you can't claim that fenbendazole prevented cancer. But sometimes we just get lucky. So there are situations that we call experiments in nature or a natural experiment. So if you look at public health programs involving the mass administration of drugs to control parasites that involve drugs like fenbendazole, it's primarily albendazole, which is more or less the same thing as fenbendazole. There's 123 nations around the world that have a public health program to control parasites in their population. Places like India, Mexico, Brazil, Niger, basically, developing countries for the most part, very different. There's 62 nations that don't. Usually the more wealthy developed countries, the US, most of Europe, Australia. If you look at the cancer rate of those two groups, the countries that use anti-parasitics have half the rate of cancer that the countries that don't. So you have
amazing.
You have an experiment in nature showing that, and that's diluting the effect when you collapse all the data. A place like Australia, they have 444 cases of cancer every year.
Just
per 100,000 people. Per 100,000 people.
Oh, okay.
A place like India has 93. So it's over four times greater in Australia than it is in India. In the US, it's about 334 per 100,000. So it's 3 times the amount. So when you look at, what's different about those countries? Well, the 123 countries that use anti-parasitics that all enjoy a low cancer rate are so different in terms of genetics, diet, geography, that it can't be one of those. Those can all contribute, but that's not the main thing. The main difference is they use anti-parasitics. So it's preventing cancer. The countries that don't use anti-parasitics, the rich Western countries, their cancer rate is elevated for a number of reasons. One is they don't use anti-parasitics. But 2, chronic, untreated, undiagnosed parasitic infection causes chronic inflammation, which is a known risk factor for cancer. So we have 2 things operating at the same time. So in the countries that use anti-parasitics, they're killing the parasites in the population. So they remove that risk factor. They also have, because they're using anti-parasitic drugs like fenbendazole, they're also killing any incipient cancer cells as well. So it's kind of preventing and killing at the same time. In the U.S., because we deny that we have parasitic infections when the CDC says that we do. There's 60 million in the U.S. There's 60 million people infected with toxocariasis, which is you get it from a cat, and everybody's infected with some sort of parasite. We just choose not to. We only treat when it's a problem, so we don't treat prophylactically. When somebody comes in and complains, like the worms are coming out of someplace, then they get treated. So there's no prevention at all, which is kind of interesting if you think about it. So in the rich countries, and the average per capita income in the rich countries is about 40,000, and in the poor countries it's about 3,000. So you have this built-in system to essentially, the poor countries can't pay for expensive cancer treatments. The rich countries can. I'm not saying that it's on purpose. I'm just saying that it's kind of an interesting, happy accident that in the US in particular, we don't treat for parasitic infections, which are obviously rampant. And yet we will, do these expensive, invasive vaccination programs for a seasonal disease that not everyone gets. So it's just kind of interesting. If you go ahead.
Can you tell us a little bit more, even though it makes me shudder, the evidence that US, we think we don't have parasites, but even the CDC says it's very common? And then I have another question.
Yeah, so in the book, I go through in detail. Ironically, the main author on a lot of these papers from the CDC is a guy named Peter Hotez, who gained
We've heard this name.
Who became famous / infamous during COVID. So he commissioned. He's a CDC scientist, so he was working and creating a case in the 2012 to 2015 time period that the U.S. is whistling through the graveyard in terms of thinking that we are free of parasites. And that I don't have the numbers at hand, but basically we're infected. And the way you get infected is parasites are, they are successful, I won't call them predators, but successful parasites. Their eggs are everywhere. If you eat vegetables that are grown in the dirt, the eggs are there. If you have a pet, you're by definition infected. You deworm your pet, but we don't deworm ourselves. And the same parasites infect both dogs and humans, and cats and humans. If you eat raw fish, if you're a sushi eater, you're infected. If you, some people kiss their dogs. I mean, that's a direct parasite delivery vehicle. And a lot of people don't realize that, the same parasites infect both. So parasitic infections, by definition, are subthreshold. If the victim, if the host knew, they would act to remove the parasites. So the parasites are designed to stay subthreshold, out of sight, out of mind, and they just sap you of energy. And the number one complaint that we have when we get older is fatigue. It's because we have untreated parasitic infections. And the solution to this problem is to recognize that we do have untreated parasitic infections, that there might be a side effect of doing that, of treating those infections, that we lower our cancer rate by at least half. Now, in the book, I talk about a very interesting comparison involving the Middle East. So in the Middle East, there's 23 countries that involve technically the Middle East. Somehow somebody defined what the Middle East was. And it involves some countries in Africa, most of the ones that we know. Of those 23 countries, only one doesn't use a dewormer, and that's Israel. Israel has twice the cancer rate of all the other countries. So so you kind of have this one outlier in the form of Israel. Very similar geography, food, lifestyle, that the alcohol differences are there, but that doesn't account for a 50% decrease in cancer rate among the people, the nations that use the anti-parasitics. And keep in mind that this is just a haphazard program. They're not trying to lower the cancer rate. They're trying to control the parasitic infestation of the population, primarily children, but they do target vulnerable adults. So you can imagine in a place like India or a place like the US, that if we targeted older people to deworm them, the cancer rate would plummet. And it's something that is cheap. You can do it certainly on a mass scale. And it's what's shocking to me is that I'm the one who is saying this. If you're a public health epidemiologist, all this data is on the WHO website. A high school kid could go do this analysis tomorrow. There's nothing secret about it. It's publicly available data. You just have to look at it through, I call it the fenbendazole lens. And it's clear as glass. I mean, a public health person, epidemiologist, a cancer epidemiologist who doesn't see this is either, incompetent or purposely not trying to see it. So it's just clear as glass. So does fenbendazole and drugs like it prevent cancer? I would say yes, based on the epidemiological data in countries that use it. So, go ahead.
You mentioned that several Middle East countries, with the exception of Israel, use dewormer. Can you tell us a little bit about is that like a population level? You mentioned children are especially targeted. And this kind of reminds me of, I remember Dr. Simone Gold mentioning that hydroxychloroquine was called the Sunday drug or something because they took it every Sunday as a preventive measure.
Yeah, so I can tell you about India because I know that in detail. So India has a public health deworming program on the February 10th and August 10th, they deworm the entire population. So they hand out a drug called albendazole, and it's just one pill. Probably Hallmark makes a card for it. It's like the National Deworming Day. So over there, it's common knowledge that anti-parasitics, they're not going to hurt you. And, they perform a function. So another emergent feature of the mass administration of these drugs is the impeccable safety record. If you're giving these drugs to kids, if you're giving them to the entire population, there can be no risk. So when Big Pharma says, "Oh, Fen-Ben and drugs like it are dangerous," it's going to fall on deaf ears because you can't say that you give them to if you they're only dangerous if you use them to treat cancer. No, it's the same drug, whether you give it to a dog or a human, it doesn't treat the species, it treats the condition. So, and there's a number of cases in the book as well where fenbendazole cured different types of cancer in dogs. So, which is what you would expect. So, it's a complete, well-rounded cancer cure whose time has come. And I think that the fact that it's off patent, that any chemical company can make this, and really it's it's so inexpensive. There's no incentive to counterfeit it or to fool around with anything. So it's kind of like the perfectly teed up. And so anyway, the book goes into a lot of the science and the detail that I think if people are interested in, they can either look at the book or they can look online at the Substack to kind of satisfy their curiosity. But when I looked at all the mechanisms, I was impressed. And another factor that may surprise you is that we'll go back to 1975. Why did I call it Little Pharma, because I'm going to explain how Little Pharma became Big Pharma. We go back to 1975, and why did you can imagine? Do you know who Gary Larson is, the Far Side? Okay, so scientists are like that. They're exactly like that. So here you have this lab that has discovered the cure for cancer. They even named it. They published the paper. They even named it oncodazole. And the way science works is what's coming out that's published is old news. Like once they had this drug, they're going to be looking at it on multiple different levels. If they had people who had friends who had cancer, they would give it to them to see what happened. So they knew this cured cancer in humans. They had to at this point. So when so now they have this drug that is cure for cancer, and they can either say, well, we're going to release it, be the heroes, we're going to cure cancer, or maybe there's a better way to do this. Maybe we just want to milk the golden goose, whatever, milk the cow without selling the cow. So what it appears happened is that some of the pharmacological mechanisms of fenbendazole, primarily the microtubule effects, what fenbendazole does specifically is it depolymerizes microtubules. That means it prevents them from assembling in the cell. Essentially, it kills the cell. What pharma did was they repurposed that mechanism into standard of care cancer drugs, primarily the taxanes at the time, which came after 1975. So if you read the development of the taxanes, the mechanism that they are promoting, that they're claiming that these cells work by, is by holding microtubules in place, preventing them from changing, which essentially kills the cell. Essentially, it's fenbendazole. It's a knockoff of fenbendazole because the mechanism of it is the same. Why do those drugs have so many side effects? Well, you don't know that answer until you have something like fenbendazole. So when you look at remember I mentioned that fenbendazole kills a cancer cell 11 different ways. And by 11 different ways, I mean, I can just list it here. Glucose uptake inhibition blocks angiogenesis, the growth of blood vessels, disrupts the molecular mimicry that cancer cells use to hide from the immune system. It disrupts the tumor microenvironment. So in pancreatic cancer, the reason why it's so tough to treat is the pancreatic tumor has a stroma around it, more or less a protective barrier. Fenben disrupts that. Fenben disables P-glycoprotein efflux pumps on the cancer cell that pump drugs out, kind of like a bilge pump in a sinking boat. They affect the P53 oncogene. They block the migration of the cell. They cause mitotic catastrophe and also trigger apoptosis. But I put this into terms that everyone can understand. That's the scientific 11 reasons here. So what fenbendazole does is they use a whole arsenal of weapons to directly hit the cancer cell life support systems. They cut off its energy, beat its camouflage, stop it from building defenses, shut down its defense mechanisms, block its escape routes, wreck its repair tools, wage war on its internal communication systems, prevent it from calling for backup, and finally make the cancer cell self-destruct. That's why fenbendazole is a perfect cancer cure. That's the very definition of overkill. So an established tumor is not a homogeneous group of cells. It's a heterogeneous group of cells. So traditional treatments will come in and they will pick off and kill the vulnerable cells and leave the cells that are not vulnerable to that to come back and kill the patient. What fenbendazole does is it comes into the system, comes into the tumor. Whatever trick the cancer cell has to evade one aspect of fenbendazole, it can evade the other 10. And it comes in and wipes out the entire tumor. So it's the very definition of overkill. So you would never have that insight of why traditional treatment doesn't work, because it's only a one-trick pony. When you have a cure like fenbendazole as an example, it's easy to see why fenben works and these other drugs don't. They're designed to fail because they only treat one part of they only kill vulnerable cancer cells. The ones that are not affected come back. They're called cancer stem cells. They come back, and because by definition there's no traditional treatment, they kill the person. So in a lot of the case reports, my mother-in-law is unique in that she tried no other traditional treatment. She tried fenben from the beginning. Most people have given, most of my case reports, the people have given, they had no other option. They went through to traditional chemo, radiation, and you can only do so much. And they were told by their oncologist, basically, sorry, you better get your affairs in order. This is all we can do for you. That's when they started fenben, is at the end of the road. So they were likely in the throes of these cancer stem cells. They took fenben, wiped out the cancer stem cells. They cured themselves. And, rather than reading about how they fought this courageous battle and lost, we're reading about how they survived and beat their own cancer, and they're helping other people do the same thing.
And
So
bounce back from all those horrific side effects, I should say, effects of the conventional treatments in
right.
some
they
cases.
had to,
Right?
yeah. So they had to deal with that. But again, they are glad that they found fenben.
Mm-hmm.
Eventually,
does your mother-in-law still take it? And if I may ask, do you have a preventative practice that you utilize?
Well, she does, and whether she needs to take it or not is debatable. So she does continue to take it. But what's interesting is, when it's a complete 180 change in attitude. So going into this, a lot of people are like, oh, this stuff, I don't know, it looks kind of scary. It's, I hope it doesn't, make me sick or kill me. Once their cancer is gone, they say, I need this stuff every day, or I'm going to die without it. So they have a complete 180 in terms of how they're viewing fenbendazole. Initially, it's wary and skeptical. Afterwards, it's like, I need this to live. And whether they continue to need it or not is debatable. That's why it would be nice for the government to actually get involved and like do clinical trials on fair clinical trials. That big pharma can't be involved because they'll kill the baby in the cradle. So we need to have the people doing this. We need to do this in a way that big pharma can't be trusted. Basically, that's my feeling, is they kind of had this ball was in their court many times, and they just kicked it out. And they're not. Cancer is something that we should not have to live with. And I do think that eventually there'll be repurposed drugs that will treat the other non-solid tumors as well. They're already out there. I mean, there's a lot of different things that will affect cancer. And because it's off patent and cheap, there's no real good old college try to figure out how to optimize it. So it's people like me who come around every so often, and we're like, there is a cure out there. And, whether it dies on the vine or not, who knows? But hopefully with the administration at HHS kind of looking to do things a little bit differently, we can actually get something done in terms of real cures for cancer that obviously involve fenbendazole, but also involve a lot of other drugs as well. And that's just not, there's a lot of things that that are effective that are more, fringe and not accepted. But I think that we need to study a lot of the repurposed medicines so that we start getting healthier, not continue to get sicker, which is right now 8 out of 10 of us, according to HHS, has a chronic condition. So whatever we're doing is not working. So cancer is just one part of health. People hope that they don't get it. With something like fenben, it's kind of, my wife and I have talked about this, and the people who have seen it work and their friends and family will say, it's kind of a, this removal of this existential threat that I don't have to be afraid of cancer anymore. I've got something that I feel if I ever do get cancer, I can effectively treat it. So conceptualizing cancer as a parasite, it's not this big, the big C, right? Like people go through this psychological process when they're diagnosed with cancer because it's been built up to be this, it's going to kill you. But
Well, we'd like to say goodbye to Bill and thank you for being here today. And please look up his Substack, fenbendazole.substack.com. And I apologize for the quick departure. Thank you, Nathan. This is your guest host, Lisa, and Bob signing off for the week.
thank you.
Thank you.
Informed Choice Washington is a nonprofit organization that advocates for healthy immunity, medical freedom, and fully informed medical consent. The right to make medical choices without coercion is fundamental to our civil liberties and a basic principle in all human rights declarations. To learn more, tune in each Friday from 4 to 5 p.m. to an Informed Life Radio and visit the website informedchoicewa.org. It's time to take a stand for medical freedom. Go to informedchoicewa.org today.
Did you know that solutions containing iodine can inactivate viruses in the nose and throat in 15 seconds? And hydrogen peroxide can do it in under 30 seconds. Decades of studies, including many conducted during COVID, have shown that properly prepared and used nasal spray and gargling solutions can reduce your risk of infection, reduce viral load, reduce symptoms, and reduce transmission of viruses. To learn more, go to healthyimmunitynow.org and check out the EFU Challenge. Why spread fear and infection when nature provides solutions? Go to healthyimmunitynow.org today.
The information contained in this episode is for informational purposes only. No material is intended to be a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment.